The chapter we are going to study today is a drama, The Dear Departed, which is written by Stanley Houghton. Now, the introduction of the play. The Dear Departed is a satire that exposes the insensitivity and dispassionate attitude of those mean and greedy individuals who neglect their near and dear ones. During their old age and impatiently await their death to grab their assets. The chapter. Let us now have a look to the overview. The chapter is about two sisters, Mrs. Amelia Slater and Mrs. Elizabeth Jordan. Mrs. Slater and Mrs. Jordan. And when these two sisters get to know that their father is dead, they concentrate on grabbing his things. Mrs. Slater asks her husband Henry to help her in shifting father's bureau and taking his clock before her sister comes. She asks him to wear father's slippers so that they should be his before her sister Mrs. Jordan comes. She orders for the morning dress. Regarding Mrs. Jordan, she and her husband come to the Slaters. Both discuss about sending the obituary to the press but desist seeing the cost. Then they want to make a list of things like jewelry, insurance that is to be divided after that. Mrs. Jordan sees the bureau and gets angry. She calls it Mrs. Slater's thieving. Both start fighting and accuse each other over keeping their father in the past. She calls it Mrs. Slater's thieving. Both start fighting and accuse each other over keeping their father in the past. They are amazed when Victoria, Mrs. Slater's 10-year-old daughter, says that grandfather is getting up. He then silences the two. The old man gets up while this goes on. He is just unable to understand what this is all about. However, he in no time understands that his both daughters are over their assets and they are fighting for them. Mrs. Jordan tells him that Mrs. Slater shifted his bureau. Mrs. Slater rebukes her while Mrs. Jordan calls her double-faced. He silences them, saying that he will make a new will, leaving all his things to whomever he would be living with when he dies. Then he makes three important decisions. Number one, to change the will. The second decision that he takes is to pay insurance premium. And the last decision was to marry Mrs. John Shirokes. Mrs. John Shirokes here in the play is the widow of Mr. John Shirokes. She handles the pub. She is the owner of the pub, that is the Ringo Bells, where the grandfather spends most of his time. And ultimately the grandfather took away all the things from his daughters. Now the theme of the play. The chapter is a hilarious comedy. It is an account of the degradation of moral values. Blinded by greed and avarice, the materialistic protagonists of the play show a total disregard for modesty, grace, decency, and filial obligation. The death of the father triggers a quarrel over the inheritance. Rather, there was any grief in the hearts of the daughters and son-in-law. However, the old man's revival from his death, apart from landing a comic effect to the play, brings out his maturity and discerning shrewdness that makes him disown his daughters. This gives the readers a sense of relief and satisfaction. The play conveys the message that old people deserve to be treated with great care and love. The days in the world are numbered. Thus looking after them should be regarded as an opportunity rather than a tiresome burden. The old should make their wills discreetly without being swayed by emotions and sentiments. This is all the basic message that has been showed or cleared, or it is made here in front of the world. It has been presented in this very drama. So this was the chapter, and in the next class we'll continue with another wonderful chapter. Thank you.